This is Megaphone from Medville Media. I'm Dave Self. This is where we hand the megaphone to healthcare leaders to share their thoughts, their perspectives, and the occasional rant about the increasingly dynamic world of healthcare. And today we're privileged to welcome, just a couple days before Christmas, privileged to welcome Tim Drake, one of the more recent members of Medvale and CEO of eTactics. Tim, welcome to Megaphone.
Thanks, David.
Hey, let's start with your journey. You and I had a chance to talk a while ago and just get a sense of who you are. Let's start with your journey to becoming CEO of eTactics. Where did it start? And fast forward us to today, because I thought it was a pretty interesting pathway that you chose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could start kind of at the beginning when I decided to go to college. Um, when I first started out in school, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, like most kids, I guess, when you're 18.
Yes.
Ultimately, I went into engineering, and that kind of led me down some paths of I didn't really like that aspect of sort of the science world. I sort of gravitated more towards physics and chemistry and math, so more the fundamentals. Ultimately, leading me into chemistry, which I had a fortunate opportunity having a great professor that I worked with, did some undergrad research at that time, got to go on some pretty cool trips and spend some time in some other countries as an undergrad, doing some, call them fellowships basically at that time. Not sure what they ended up calling them these days, but
So, what
um,
countries did you go to?
I spent some time in Canada and Germany, actually. The Germany connection actually gets more so with my father, who actually lives in Germany. So I grew up kind of going there, and so the opportunity presented myself with being able to go spend a few days there and a couple of weeks basically at an institute, and got to hang out with him a little bit. So I was fortunate to get a pretty good understanding of sort of that academic world as an undergrad, and then I basically at that time was thinking about becoming a high school teacher initially. Um, and I wanted to coach tennis. I was a tennis player in high school, and I was like, hey, I want to do this. Felt good about teaching and dealing with kids and really trying to teach them, obviously things that I learned from a non-tennis coach. Uh, One of the teachers I had actually just stumbled her way into tennis, actually, and I sort of felt a lot of connection with the sport, and chemistry was kind of my connection to the academics, right? So, um, kind of got more deep into the research side of things in undergrad, and that kind of led me down a different path and said, well, why don't I teach young adults and go become a professor, right? So I was like, I'm going to go get a doctorate in chemistry. That then led me from Texas Tech University to the University of Florida for my graduate work. Joined a nice group there, did research on all kinds of things from nanoparticles to neuron stimulation research with pumping in some chemicals into neurological cells and mouse brains, things like this, that to create responses to ultimately stimuli that somehow talked about memory, right? So I was doing a lot of neurological research, but at a real fundamental science level, trying to understand how memory works. And then ultimately got my doctorate dissertation on single cell breast cancer expression. We used to inject some molecules in, and we looked at how those gene expressions were happening in real time to understand, which ones were turned on, which ones were turned off, those types of things, right? So I spent a lot of time in a dark room. And so now, even to this day, lights tend to bother me, right? I'm kind of my wife tells me I'm, a vampire more often than not, because I just like sitting in the dark, and if the TV's on, that's enough light for me. I don't need any extra light going on. So in any event, so I spent basically 5 years living in a dark cave, where we had highly sensitive instruments for light. And about the last year in my studies, we had developed a patent, and so my advisor had asked me to go around to a couple of universities and In this case, I went to Columbia University to present this patent to create a partnership, and I happened to make this trip with a business owner who had licensed the ability to help us sell that patent. Ironically enough, it was probably the most um, impactful trip I've ever taken because it really changed the whole course of my life at that point. So I was basically in my fourth year of grad school, getting ready to, defend within the next 6 to 12 months, let's say. And I'm on this business trip for a few days in New York City. And yeah, this guy took me around, showed me good food, showed me a good time, showed me kind of the business world. And I came back from that trip just invigorated about the idea that, do I really want to do hardcore science and live in a lab, or do I want to try to create something, around solutions and talk to people, right? So I kind of discovered while I was kind of an introvert scientist, what I actually did like was when I was out among people talking about sort of the science, but the real world applications of it, that really drove me. And so I made this connection, and I ended up getting into more of a business side of the science world, which basically I started my career as a technical engineer, trying to create solutions with electron microscopes. I spent a lot of time in steel mills to mining companies, sort of all over the world, from China to India to the Philippines, Malaysia. I mean, I was bouncing all over the place. Europe was involved in that as well. And really just trying to find solutions for industrial problems that an electron microscope could actually solve. So it actually afforded me the ability to work not only on the hardware side of the equipment, but also that software side, right? So I was going in and working with the software devs and kind of playing around a lot with how do we make this look better for the engineers, and how do we get the data out? How do we get the insights out of that data onto a piece of paper so that they can make business decisions critical for their business and help them move forward within that industry space, right? So we were taking raw data, millions of lines of information, and turning it into a nice, pretty picture that they could actually say, "Oh, I understand what that is now. This is the change I need to make," right? So that's early in my career. And I took that opportunity to explore much more the marketing and sales side of things, as well as because I kind of had the technology space, but I really liked the people and dealing with people, talking to people about ideas. And so that sort of drove me right into sales and marketing. I don't know how I ended up there, but it just naturally picked it up. And so I went from sort of this technical engineer to basically running sales and marketing at an electron microscope company. And that was private equity. So I got a good taste of kind of what private equity world looks like.
Right.
Uh, and Eventually, we ended up exiting out of that business. I stayed on with the strategic who had purchased us, but decided, the strategic was, say, $1 billion company, and I kind of liked small companies, and that didn't, quite work out as well for me in my brain as terms of what I wanted to do. So I ended up kind of transitioning to an Ohio company where I was in water treatment of all things, and not to do with microscopes, but it was chemistry. And they're like, "Hey, you got a chemical background, come help us with this company." And I was fortunate enough to have a really good mentor who actually came with me from that last company, and sort of showed me the ropes of executive leadership and really how to run a company. I mean, he was an MBA engineer, I was a PhD chemist. Everything I've learned about business has been through on the job training, and how to run, how to read a P&L of all things, right? I mean, they don't teach this stuff in chemistry.
No, they
Um,
do not.
and much less than medicine, right? I mean, it's kind of the same kind of scenario. And so I really got a good opportunity to dig in deep on business and understand the dynamics, as we used to call them. There's always these levers you can pull. They have cause and effect. So which lever do I want to pull to create this effect in the business? And that really did afford me a lot of opportunities to expand and understand how things operate. So fast forward a little bit, I took over that company. But at the same time, I ironically moved to a place called Hudson, Ohio, which is close to the office where I lived. I got married, um, ended up having a couple of kids, and then, was doing pretty well. I was the president of this company, and we were doing fortunate. It's another private equity venture, so to speak. And my neighbor asked me to go to lunch. And this particular neighbor never asked me to go to lunch, and he knows this story. But at the end of the day, he says, "Hey, I'm 65, kind of got some other priorities I want to do with my life, and I've got this great company. Would you be interested in coming and helping me out and running it for me and working as CEO?" And I was like, "Well, what do you do, Mike?" Because we'd never actually talked about it very much.
So you're
And
you're learning all this over a salad, it sounds like.
over a salad, and yeah, I was sort of half expecting something was up because he never, like I said, we've done dinner, we've played golf, there's other things we do, and we're social as families go. And I knew his kids and everything. But so I said, "Well, what do you do, Michael? I can't really answer that question until you tell me more about what you do." So we went through this basically 6 weeks of back and forth, lots of meetings, and understanding that it's really a software company that's in the healthcare industry, and they kind of, synergistically to my background, how do they get solutions that can help allow the doctors to operate more efficiently, obviously get paid by payers and their patients,
Mhm.
and ultimately try to remove some of that noise, but also, and I think that's where we're trying to head, which is how do we get that data we have? Because we have mounds and mounds of data. How do we get that data to translate it into insights so that they can make good business decisions? And that sort of resonated with me. The other piece of that is the great people that work here. We're local to Hudson, Ohio. When customers call us, we pick up the phone here, which is important for most people. And, ultimately, the culture is everybody wants everybody to succeed. They care about the business. And I had an opportunity to meet with some of the leadership, and you could kind of see that in the passion and how they talked about things. So,
You can
um,
feel it when it's real, you
right.
feel it,
It's tangible, right?
truly.
Meaningful, material, those are 2 words we typically use, where you can tell, and it's not something you can touch or feel, but you can tell. And so ultimately, between the people, and I trust Michael, and the business was sort of aligned with some of my background, obviously technology. And the fourth component was when I was doing water treatment, we worked a lot with hospitals, more on water issues, right? So we did central sterile water treatment concerns, right? So, one of the highest risks is post-op, what's the word I'm looking for?
Surgical
Infection,
site infections. Yes.
right? Post-op infections, so to speak. And so, there's some new, I'd call them regulations that's been coming out and is now pretty widely prolific, where central sterile operations tended to be kind of a concern for that, and so they ratcheted up the requirements on the water. So I spent a lot of time with hospitals, understanding kind of what's going on and the nuances with it, and we did other treatment there as well. And so it was kind of in a space that I always enjoyed. And it kind of got me back to my roots in grad school, which is where, I mean, I literally spent, when I was doing the neurological stuff, I mean, I literally spent months in a dark room again, in in the medical building at the University of Florida, and in their neuroscience kind of wing. And I really liked that environment. So I thought, maybe I'm just coming back home. And even fuller circle, I was born in Cleveland, raised in Texas, and now I'm back in Cleveland. So I kind of made this full circle journey all the way to basically land at a healthcare software company that is actually run or owned by my neighbor. And there's a lot of decisions I made to get here, but that's, you know, there's something in there, and I can't figure out what it would be, but you could call it faith, you could call it, God's looking down on me. You could call it a lot of different things, but decisions matter, and I think in business decisions matter, and sometimes you have to just make a decision, and you'll end up in the right path. So ultimately, that's why I ended up here. I made a decision.
Wow. That I don't know about you, man, but that I'm exhausted.
It's a
you
long story.
you were all over the globe. That's
I
fantastic.
I
So,
I
do you
did.
importantly, do you still wanna coach tennis? That's what people really wanna know.
Actually, I would. I had the fortunate opportunity this year. My daughter's now in second grade, and she's gravitated towards liking. I won't say loving, but liking cross country. And so I volunteered this year as a coach, and I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I took me a while to get a hang of the kids. Two second graders are, kind of all over the map a little
Yes,
bit.
they are. In the
Uh,
best possible way, man. Everything is still possible.
but it's a lot of fun. They enjoy it, and as long as you try to keep it a little bit creative, they stay engaged. But I do like it, and so yeah, I mean, I'd be more than happy to coach tennis still. I mean,
Okay. So noted. Well, if we see any gigs for tennis coaches come up, you'll be the first one at the top of the
right on.
list. Yeah. Well, doing a little research on your organization, company values stand out and have a very prominent place on your website.
Mhm.
And you touched on a couple of things. There are some key words that you use, material, and so seems like a very thoughtful approach to who the organization is and the expectation of people in the organization to live up to these values. Hey, can you unpack that for us a little bit? Comment on company values.
Sure. Well, to go backwards to go forwards again. So 1999, eTactics was created. Michael decided, Michael Teutsch, kind of was presented with an opportunity. And of all things, he used to sell for Kodak, which has got nothing to do with healthcare, but somehow, ironically, with the new HIPAA laws and all the things coming out in the late 90s, recognized an opportunity to create a software solution. And so, at the end of the day, he really saw the need, and this is still pervasive in the organization, the need to really make that transactional space between patient, doctor, and payer somehow be more seamless. And at that time, it was all paper, more or less, right? This was all
Oh,
on the
absolutely.
electronics, right? And so,
Fax machines rule.
right. Ironically enough, we still have to use fax for some payers. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Yes. Yes,
Um,
you do.
uh, But, so the value was, how do we create that triangle of ecosystem between those three individuals and put us somehow in the middle to create clean pathways so that they can navigate this process more cleanly. And so that kind of started, you know, in my mind, where the business went from a culture standpoint. It really was about, we care about how the doctors you know, can operate their business, but also we care about the patients. So when you think about it and you get this bill from whoever you go and see,
Right.
historically it's evolved quite a lot over the last 20, 25 years. Um, and that interaction is still an interaction. It's a patient interaction, although you don't realize it, but from a patient's perspective, that interaction does matter. And so we spent a lot of time historically focusing on that interaction, as well as the doctor's interactions, right? So how the doctor navigates getting paid from a payer, an insurance company, or a provider, if you will, gets paid from them. But also, how does the patient interact with the doctor, from scheduling to, how do they get their invoice, if you will, their statement? What does it look like? How do you even read these things? He spent a lot of time looking at that, right?
Okay.
And it became very important that, there's subtle nuances to when you get these things that he cared about. And that kind of created a little bit of a culture within the organization that we also cared about that, right? And so I think over time it's just continued to blossom, and we're really trying to focus ourselves right now on how do we continue to move that needle, given sort of the dynamics of obviously all the changes that are continuing to happen. but all the roadblocks too. So it's an interesting dynamic and interesting business to be in at this particular moment in time for a lot of different reasons, but it is still evolving, fortunately.
Well, it sounds as though the founder, Michael, was quite a forward thinker because at the time that he founded the company, yes, it was all paper, but there was also there were dynamics in the industry where people really were not focused on the consumer, the member, the patient. You know, depending on which group you're in, is how you viewed the stakeholders that you served or that you interacted with. So, pretty forward thinking. It sounds as though it's evolved into something much more than just revenue cycle. I realize that maybe the category that you get lumped into, but if you're reaching beyond the standard rev cycle
And
stuff.
we do, right. And so there's technically three companies within the enterprise. So there's
Okay.
eTactics. About 5 or 6 years after eTaxis was started, they also opened up a company called Open Practice Solutions, which is on the practice management side, which, as you can imagine, gets even closer to the patient side because now you're dealing with obviously the billers, doing their codings and things like that, but, scheduling and, dealing with eligibility checks and things along those lines, you're getting more and
Right.
more closer to that interaction, which we thought there was a gap in that space, and it turns out that that's actually the case, and so we're doing pretty well there. Um, and then there's a whole other compliance side of this world, right? There's not just the money side, right? So how do we make sure that the information gets from one person to the next to ensure that all that works, so that there's obviously funding for the doctors to continue to provide the care that they want. But at the other side of that, there's a whole compliance angle. And so as we kind of were growing and we were maturing, we started to run into needing to have certain compliance things done. And we didn't really have a good tool to do that. Just like most people, you start with a piece of paper. And then at some point you outgrow that piece of paper and you create a spreadsheet. And then at some point the spreadsheet makes no sense. So you need something of a tool to do this. And so about 5 years ago, we actually created K2GRC, which is a governance risk compliance software that's got an integrated learning management system in it, right? And so there's a whole nother software thing that goes on behind the scenes where if you want to make sure you're staying in compliance with HIPAA and doing the things that you're supposed to be doing and tracking those things for audit purposes, there's a tool that our partners, our customers can actually take advantage of to help facilitate those things. So you just said it, yeah, we get lumped into the RCM space a little bit,
Mhm.
but the reality is that relationship ecosystem is quite far and wide if you don't narrow it down to just saying I'm just a clearinghouse. And that's, I think, the message that we try to provide with our customers is says, yes, we can do that, but really, what other things are you having challenges with that we can help you with? Because I think at the end of the day, any of those challenges still impact the patient experience. And,
Absolutely.
eh, you know, the more disgruntled you get, the more impact it has in some cases, right? And so every time we can try to take some of that out of the system, I think we're making healthcare better for everybody, not only the doctors, but also the patients.
Well, certainly more friction free, it sounds like.
Right.
Although you're violating one of the Medvale rules about the length of an acronym, K2GRC. I'm not sure what it stands for, but and you're mixing in numerals with letters, and
Hey, I'll just it predates me.
okay, you get a pass on this one. We'll work on the naming conventions later. Um, what do you run into with your clients being their biggest issues? Now, you touched on these three distinct components of the organization and some of the things that they're addressing individually, but then creating this virtuous cycle, I would presume is the goal. But what are the big issues today that your clients are facing?
I think it starts, you kind of walk it through, I'll just say from a customer journey standpoint. And if you start at the beginning, the first thing we have to do is we have to enroll these providers with these insurers so that the information flows in the right way. And this enrollment process, I'll just say, tends to be a little bit manualized historically. With in some cases because of the payer, some cases because of the clearinghouses. But it's also a hurry up and wait type game, and so uh, we take in this form. Mind you, the forms are different for every payer in the world.
Oh,
There's no
yes.
standardization that exists on what information they want, how they want it. And so, okay, at this point now we have these, let's just say 100 different insurers we need to get 100 different providers set up with. You can imagine the mounds of it used to be paper, but now fortunately it's electronic. But all that information has to be processed. And then you also have the complexities of, certain payers want a signature, a wet signature. Some don't. They just need electronic signature, right? And so, okay, now we're actually moving physical documents around. I think whether that's the worst thing that they deal with, I don't know, but it's certainly the most friction at the beginning of a relationship, because you're trying to get something going and get it new so that they can get away from sort of the challenges that they had. There's a reason they made the switch, if you will.
Yes.
Um, and that creates a little bit of friction. I kind of touched on another point, which is probably a maybe a little bit bigger pain point, which is the standardization. So they have some standardization, but they're just like most things. They're just guidelines left up to the interpretation. So, um, you talk to an attorney and you can say, well, there's this way or that way, and this is the interpretation I have. You talk to another attorney and they're going to tell you the same thing, but I interpret it this way. And I think that's kind of what's happening right now with some of the payers is that there's interpretations, and what works for them, but it's not, I guess, clear enough in some cases. So what ends up happening is you have this fracturing of how standardization actually is supposed to be working, which creates a lot of complexity for how we have to send things. So if you want to send it to this payer and it's done this insurance for this patient, it might have to be slightly different how we actually channel that information over to the insurers. Um, you know, that's probably the two biggest things that kind of stand out in my mind. But um, I know there's many, many more, and uh, we could probably talk for quite a long time about some of the challenges we have. But I think those are the two big issues right now. Is if we could get better standardization, and I think they're moving in some directions that way. But the enrollment process is a little bit egregious right now.
Yes, it is. Claims membership and eligibility used to be a simple game for payers, and they have, and I say this as a recovering payer of 25 years. Um, there have been more roadblocks put in place, yes, by attorneys, but also by not coming together and saying, what are we all really focused on? Let's compete on our reputation, our service, and the other things. In addition to all those things, they've added their own version of administrivia. And so, to your point, there's no clean crosswalk that gets you from payer A to payer B to C, D, or however many a practice is actually dealing with. So it is very complex, and it adds administrative burden and hassle factors. So
Well, and I
it's
think
just
that
not something that is sustainable.
and I think it has a trickle down, which ultimately leads to, you know, why are you getting denials if you want to talk about denials at all? And at the end of the day, I think I just saw an article 2 3 months ago, might have been in the summer, where um, certain hospital was dealing with denials, and they were gonna automate this to try to make their coding better. And so they basically said, hey, we're gonna do some more AI based sort of interpretations of things and put this coding in a little bit, right? So automation, and that was great. But what actually happened in some ways, was, well, the insurance providers put their AI in, right? And so then it's AI fighting AI, and I'm just sitting here. I'm wondering to myself as I'm kind of, and I heard her talk about this recently as well. But I'm wondering to myself, where are we going here? Are we just going to have AI fighting AI on whether something is insurable or not? I mean, does that make a lot of sense?
Yeah, we could have the globe of death for the different AIs and just set them loose in there and see what happens. We could take bets on the side, maybe fund healthcare.
Yeah.
Uh, what are the challenge? What are the challenges that you face at eTactics in running a successful organization in the current environment that we have today?
Um, I think in some cases it's, as with most businesses, it's keeping up, right? It's a dynamic environment. It's certainly growing. Right or wrong in terms of what you consider growing is right or wrong, but it's growing. The pace is going to be picking up. I think AI is got to be something that we have to figure out, and we are. We've got active projects on that, trying to figure out what makes sense and what really doesn't make sense. Um, I think there's risk in that that we're currently kind of debating internally, obviously. But at the end of the day, we're a company going from small, medium to medium, right? And I think the biggest challenge when that happens is we're it's kind of like the analogy I gave earlier about why we created the K2 platform. You're going from pieces of paper to then a spreadsheet to now you need a tool. And so we've kind of gotten to the point where we got the tools, but now we've got lots of tools and they're all interconnected and maybe not interconnected enough. And so you've kind of got this natural, you've outgrown what it is you've created and you need to kind of mature your processes. So when I came in originally, it's evident we have to mature a little bit about how we handle certain things and where we go with that. And so I think for us, we're you know customer success drives most everything, right? We're very key on that. We want to make sure that that interaction with us stays consistent. And then it's the technical side, right? So the technology side. How do you interact with our platform? That needs to be updated. So we're going through some of that right now and investing quite heavily in that. And so, eTactics will be quite different in about 12 to 24 months with a lot more value add that historically we've sort of driven, sort of kind of piecemeal together, but now it's a lot more strategic and focused. So I think it's all on how we approach that. We're starting to create more partnerships with future and current customers to try to drive sort of what that roadmap looks like, and making sure that we don't miss where the real pain is. And we've had conversations before, Dave, about, and it's come up in other conversations about this idea of what is healthcare. Well, in my mind, healthcare is a little bit about the patient and that experience with their doctor. And there's so much stuff that prevents that from actually happening easily. And so what can we do in our product roadmaps to actually make that better somehow, and not try to be part of the problem and be more part of the solution for the future 10 to 20 years.
It's a very thoughtful approach to providing real solutions to the challenges that people are facing today. Tim, I want to first of all congratulate you and joining Medvale, and thank you for leaning into the community itself. I believe that what you're bringing to the table is going to be of great interest to your fellow Medvaleistas, and so we'll see how what kind of bully pulpit you can get to make some real change happen across this country in healthcare. We like to get some insider guidance from our guests because Maria and I are building a travel log of great places to eat and things to do. So when we come to Hudson, Ohio, what is the must do thing and where is the must go place for great food?
So, um, so Hudson, Ohio is just outside of Cleveland. So the place you'll probably end up going is to Cleveland. There's a lot of good food in Hudson. Good local bar. If you need like a Cheers environment, Hudson's Restaurant. It's really easy to remember. Uh,
Creative, yeah.
You walk in and they know your name kind of place. It's actually the first place my wife and I started going to originally when we moved here. Got to know the owners, and 6 days after my daughter was born, she was in that bar, and the waitresses were carrying her around so we could have a good dinner. So um, it's just that kind of place, right? And it's
Love
just
it.
really good. Talking about Cleveland a little bit more. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is here. There's also in Canton, obviously the NFL Hall of Fame. Those are probably two cool things to do, but uh, I think food wise, I'd tell you go to Tremont, probably one of the better food areas. But Cleveland is a food town. You can't pick just one place.
Okay.
But really nice, cool environment in a town called Lakewood, which is Pier W, is a nice place to go. It's kind of got this. It's out on a pier, sits out kind of over the lake off a cliff, and you're just kind of out there. And you can and you're so far out and removed from the downtown, you actually look out and you see downtown across the
No,
lake.
that sounds very cool. Okay. All right. We've got some
So there's a couple
recommendations
things
now.
for you.
Well, and you're speaking my language with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So we'll just put that one on the books. When I'm back in town, we're going to hit the Rock and Roll Hall and then go to Pier W.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, Tim, you get the last word today. What message will you leave us with?
Um, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there to streamline things, and don't lose sight of where the bottlenecks are. If we can get rid of the bottlenecks, I think everybody's life will be easier.
Tim, thank you so very much. Our guest today, Tim Drake, CEO of eTactics. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Welcome to Medvale. Look forward to your contributions in the community. That's all for this edition, but join us next time for Megaphone from Medvale Media. I'm Dave Self, and Maria won't like this because it's going to date this episode, but Tim, wishing you, your family, and friends a very happy Christmas, happy holidays to all watching this. And if you're watching this for some reason in March or April of 2026, hope you had a great holiday. I'm Dave Self. Be well.